January 30th, 2009. My name is Charles Westbrook. I'm an undergraduate in the History Department. I'm interviewing as Chairman of the History Department, Dr. John Black.
Thank you, John.
I thought I would like to establish a timeline of the years that you worked with Dr. Roberts. Could you tell me a general overview of when you came to the school and the years that you worked with her? Just a very macro view of the time frame.
I was stationed with the Army in 1966 at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And there I met some people who were related to the head of the English department here. And I was looking for a job as I was to be discharged in 1967. And it was in that plane that we met for the first time, Dr. Roberts in Huntsville in 1966, late 1966. I joined the faculty in 1967.
And you chose UAH because of your relationship with Dr. Roberts?
That would be correct. And also because it was a springboard for what I thought would be a career elsewhere. We came to Huntsville with the idea of staying a single year, and sure enough, the job offers came in that first year after I was established here, but I decided I wanted to stay. I liked what I saw, and that's the beginning of a relationship that lasted until Dr. Roberts retired and beyond.
In 1970, you were Senate Department Chair of the department, and you were named Chair of the History Department until what year?
1991. About 21 years, I think. My math's not terribly good.
20 years longer than you anticipated. There was a common idea during the early years of the school that UAH was to be a school for veterans or a school for science and engineering. That's probably still a hot topic today. Do you remember what Dr. Frances Roberts' vision for the school was at that time?
She wanted a full university. She didn't want it to be an extension center. She wanted it to be an independent branch. But more than that, she wanted it to be far-reaching and a broad educational base. She did not particularly have much use for the idea of it being a technical institute. She wanted it to stand on equal footing with UAB and UAT or Alabama, however you want to call it. She was very proud of Huntsville, and she thought that the mark of success was on Huntsville, and she thought that the technological community could only profit from exposure to the liberal arts.
She was not the originator of the idea of general education's requirement foundation for graduation, but she certainly championed general education.
Who would you say was the originator?
I think the idea was born nationally in the 50s. I believe that Dr. Eleanor Hutchins
I think she
introduced Dr. Roberts to that idea, but I don't know.
I think that Dr. Hutchins put it on paper and probably introduced it to the faculty senate, and as such is the author. But Frances Roberts and Dr. Hutchins worked hand in glove, and in those early years, and I would tend to think that both of them share that honor as far as having the idea. I don't think Frances would have ever joined up with the university if she thought that there wasn't going to be a general education requirement involved in political office.
In 1969, the school was given its autonomy. Do you remember the role that she played in that autonomy?
Well, she was part of the community that pushed for that, and she certainly did a lot of lobbying for that, and I would say that that was probably the work mostly of the Huntsville Foundation and some of the administrative officers here. Before that time, Huntsville had been administered by a vice president for Huntsville Affairs. And really, no matter whether you called it a university center or an extension center, it was a junior branch of the main campus, and it didn't have much authority to act on its own.
That was divided in force to see autonomy was to bring it to local control.
Well, at least to have input into it. Now, you know, Mobile worked away from the system and assumed control of the deeds and its program independent of the Alabama system. In order to prevent that, the founding fathers, whether you call it the Huntsville Foundation or these concerned citizens, Von Braun and others, put the deeds in safekeeping in Tuscaloosa. And so every time someone would threaten that the only answer to Huntsville's dilemmas or problems would be to break away, it was always brought up that the deeds to the building belonged to Tuscaloosa.
Once autonomy was granted, the next challenge facing the university was accreditation. That's all important for universities' accreditation. I know that Dr. Roberts worked on various committees with Dr. Samuel and McManus to achieve accreditation for the school. I have been told that accreditation is a process that's not quickly achieved, but yet UAH received accreditation on the first try. The first application for accreditation was granted. Do you remember the roles that Dr. Roberts played working for accreditation?
Well, it was a very strong role, and her role was to emphasize the well-rounded university, and she spoke with the accreditation committee on that, and the need to develop disciplines outside of science and engineering. Though she would never diminish their importance, she said that it just couldn't stand alone. And she served on various administrative committees that worked with it. At that time, the university was in the throes of organizing itself, and it was and it never recovered from that first accreditation because every faculty member was put to work. I served on several committees, including the organization committee, and God knows how many other committees, and we worked night and day for this accreditation, but the problem became that the discrepancies between salaries and benefits and facilities and between the various divisions of the university became known. And unfortunately, at the time of the accreditation, the administrative plan of the university was in the hands of a very capable person, but he had ideas that were diametrically opposed to Francis Roberts, and he believed, on the advice of a consultant, Aljo Henderson, that the only way to build an institution was to have adversity and conflict and competition between the elements. And Francis's viewpoint was that you should have cooperation, a certain amount of competition, but should not set each other against one another. And that first accreditation exposed all the law edges and grievances of the various components of the university. You know, how resources would be allocated, such as the library, research, faculty salaries, developmental work, and that sort of thing. You've got to understand that in Huntsville in 1967, the community was practically divided between those who had graduated from Auburn and those who had graduated from Tuscaloosa, and the idea of an emerging institution in the center of the town that might rival either of those institutions, or in fact would be calling on the local residents for support and money that would otherwise go to their alma mater, was about a very difficult issue.
Loyalties to Alabama and Auburn are still quite high amongst the
That's right, that's right.
You have indicated to me previously that you and my daughters worked together quite closely. I know that she was rather strong-willed, and I know that she had a vision for the way she wanted the school to go. Could you give me a couple of examples of things that you saw eye to eye with her on, and could you possibly give me an example of some things that you ever did with policy issues, macro issues for the department?
I don't think Francis and I had any disagreements on ideas in the academic world. We might evaluate people differently, and we might work with people differently, but as far as a baseline curriculum, as far as having a course syllabus, having a lot of tutorial work, Francis was very interested in making sure that those who didn't have the proper credentials were taught in the tutorial section of Western civilization. I thought that was a grand idea, and we hired people to teach that would get students who were really turned off by the idea of taking a history course or learning anything about their place and time and space. We also were firm believers that history was a humanity. It was not concerned with finite numbers, and it was not concerned with the statistical analysis of the behavioral sciences. And so we had a hard way to go. We allied ourselves to the disciplines that we felt the closest to, which would be English and art and music. Now, I would say that we agreed on almost everything. She was very strong-willed. She wanted to see things operate. She was very supportive of me as chairman, and she never withheld what she thought of other people. She was very straightforward, and in meetings, if she disagreed with them, she would certainly come right out and say so. The department developed along a rocky road because there were no guidelines at all in the university when I first came here as to such things as tenure and promotion. And in fact, my tenure was granted to me by the administration. The faculty wasn't even consulted. And I think that Francis and I, in trying to establish guidelines along this, created quite a bit of controversy on campus when we would withhold tenure from people that we didn't think were worthy of being full-time professors. They were, remember, this is all in the 60s and the aftermath of the 60s, and there was a lot of the me generation involved. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it pretty much does.
I had one major disagreement with her.
I would love to hear that.
Well, and I don't think she ever forgave me for the fact that when I was working with her on establishing Constitution Hall Village, she wanted to have the historian as the head of the village and representing the university and representing the community, and she could not see, nor would she ever see, that a museum headed by someone in one discipline we took that discipline more seriously than any of the other areas that needed financial help. Could not survive. And so, over her membership on the board, I was the chairman of the board. She had been the original chairman. I was the second chairman. I pulled the decision to the board. It was an even split, and I said, well, we're overruling the minority on this. We are going to hire someone who has public relation and fundraising skills, and it will be to the board's interest and duty to preserve the historical aspects of the park. Now, that's the only time that Francis and I really had a knockdown drag-out fight.
And that had nothing to do with UAH.
Had nothing to do with UAH.
How did the idea of the Constitution Village originate?
That originated with the development officer of, at the time, a very nice gentleman, Philip Mason, a lady who's a historian, Sarah Fisk, a local historian, and Francis Roberts. Those were the three movers of that original committee that set about establishment. They worked with the Alabama Historical Commission. They worked with all the organizations locally to get that legislation and the city resolutions and everything.
I'd like to take you back 1 second to the 70s. Those were fairly turbulent times in the nation, and I don't believe that Huntsville faced many of the problems that a good portion of the country faced, but there was still a little bit of craziness on campus. I think Dr. Roberts garnered a little bit of that attention. There were three faculty members, Dr. Strimsky, Dr. Lux, and the third,
Dr. Morrison, Mr. Morrison,
that were denied tenure. There was a pleasant prim letter published in the school newspaper, a rather dirty cartoon of Dr. Roberts as an executioner,
and me standing beside him.
And I believe Dr. Shields standing beside him as well. This was all due to the fact that the school was new and it was establishing rules for tenure and how people would be retained and promoted and paid. And I know that one of those professors at the school, there was a question about their academic resume and whether they were actually pursuing a PhD. I understand that one of the people involved had not been honest with Dr. Roberts and was not actively pursuing his PhD.
That's correct.
The other two were popular with the students.
Only one popular with the students. That's Dr. Shields.
And then that created a good enough. Would you say that was the biggest controversy during that decade, the biggest controversy that Dr. Roberts was involved in as far as the students?
Yes, I would say so, and I think that a lot of members of the faculty from different divisions of the university never forgave either Francis or me for taking the stand we did on the tenure of several of the faculty. And yet it was ironic within a year the very members of the various departments that had criticized our strong stand on tenure were using the policies that we got established in the same criteria. And I never ceased to be amazed that they were capable of doing an about-face like that. But I don't regret anything. I think the department emerged stronger by the candidates that we ultimately tendered.
I found in the archive a number of letters from students addressed to you, commenting on Dr. Roberts, what great teacher she was, how she now related to you, how she worked with their class, how appreciative they were of her and her efforts. But we think about things like poison pen letter in the student newspaper and the cartoon in the paper, and the attention that she garnered over that issue involving those three professors. Do you think that amused her and hurt her feelings?
I think it made her angry. I think she thought it was absolutely outrageous. We both shared that opinion and thought that the people were operating with incomplete information, and at the time we tried to hold back some of the information that we had because we thought it would damage the people when they left here as far as getting another job or harm them professionally. And gradually, as the controversy grew, we began releasing more and more information and making more public statements. And it's very hard to say no to someone who's popular with the students. But only one of those was really popular with the students. That was the one that caused the greatest campus uproar. The administration backed me and Francis on this issue. They solved the problems, and that's the end of the story. But there were hard feelings that lingered for decades over the controversy.
I understood that, but it just stood at such odds with everything that I've seen about Dr. Roberts. She seemed to put so much into her students, so much into the...
Well, I think that's why she took such a stand on the idea that we would tenure anyone who did not put student interests above all else and would make sacrifices that benefited the students. Dr. Roberts didn't mind working an 18-hour day, and she didn't mind asking you to work an 18-hour day. And she did not think it was inappropriate if you taught from 6 to 10 at night to bring you back at 8 o'clock in the morning for another class. And a lot of the young faculty thought that was absolute nonsense, and they would not go along with the schedule. They would not go along with having a syllabus. They didn't like the textbook. They didn't want to have a textbook. And Dr. Roberts thought that, there were other basic issues that we won't go into it. She didn't fire or remove anyone because of personality issues. It was always on principles of what they were doing in the classroom or not doing.
That's for the student.
That's for the student. I sat home one night. This was long after I'd been chairman. I'd been chairman a number of years, and she called me and she said, "I just wanted your clearance for what I've just done." And I said, "What's that, Francis?" She said, "Well, I locked so-and-so in the seminar room, and I will not let him out until he finishes his paper." And I said, "Well, Francis, can he get out by calling security, or is there any way that if anything should happen as far as fire or damage, that he would not be incarcerated in this room?" She said, "Well, I didn't think about that." She said, "Well, I'll go back and talk to him about it, but he better not leave that room." And I said, "The second thing is, he is a minor. I would call his parents and advise them of the action you have taken." She said, "Oh, very well, I'll do that." So she did. The student stayed all night, finished his paper, and there were no hard feelings. He later was one of the ones who wrote the letters of support.
I've heard that story. I haven't heard that completely. The mid-70s began, I believe, a really sad period of her life. She was diagnosed with cancer at some point in the mid-70s. That led to a battle with Berets syndrome.
Which was a kudo for the University of Alabama and Birmingham. Francis went to Mayo Clinic, and I read the medical reports, and it was Birmingham that identified that it's William Beret, and it was not Mayo. And the status of UAB went up immeasurably in my mind, that whereas Francis had spent weeks at Mayo, and the which I had always considered the top diagnostic center of the Western Hemisphere. And they came back with an unknown, undiagnosed virus. Within 24 hours, they had it diagnosed and began treatment with Francis at UAH, and I can't say enough for praise of their facilities in that regard.
But diagnosing it and beginning the treatment was not a quick cure.
There was not a quick cure, and she could not walk, and she could not use her arms and legs, but they began therapy. But I can remember times when her family would have a picnic, and Frances was in a sort of a sling-type arrangement that you would have in those days. They were called walkers, I believe, for children, where there were two pieces of material, and she just sat in this thing just sort of like a lump of human flesh. And I remember at one of these family picnics, I was there, and so was my wife and several of Frances's friends. The family kept talking about what Frances would do and what Frances would say and what they should do and what. And Frances piped up and said, "Frances is here, and she doesn't like being referred to in the third person. So will you please stop telling me what I should do or what is best for me?" That changed the whole focus of the picture.
Throughout this period, she still continued to teach.
There was a time when she had to take leave of absence in her recovery period. She probably came back too soon, a semester too soon. The university had no sick leave policy and had no money with which to pay a replacement or a substitute. So all of us chipped in. My wife, Dr. Shields, yours truly, and a couple of others to cover her classes for the semester or so that she was out. Of course, it was hard to replace her in certain areas because none of us had the expertise. But, for instance, my wife acquired a great deal of knowledge and certainly a lot of hard work in constitutional history. I took over her freshman, and Dr. Shields took over Southern and Alabama history, and we worked it out. But we were carrying essentially overloads. But in those days, you didn't say, "What's in it for me?" You just put your shoulder to the wheel.
And after that period, she came back to where she was cane. At one point, I know that she even called out a wheelchair.
As I say, I think she probably, medically, it was a mistake for her to come back as early as she did.
Dr. Lee Williams told me at one point he thought it was just her strength of will that drove her to come back and continue teaching.
I think that's true, and also she missed it desperately. It was a great part of her life. And she couldn't, face the other option, which was to stay at home and have someone turning pages for her, and she wanted to be back in contact. And in that sense, probably psychologically, I'm not qualified to make a statement that has any bearing in medical science, but to me, it made her happy. But there are always consequences to that. I don't think she really resented being held to a wheelchair or a cane. She never took to that at all. And it's partially because of the fact that she would not use her walking stick as much as she should, that she fell outside of one of the classrooms. And at the time, we had all petitioned the administration for a banister, a rail to get into this classroom, which was sort of a sunken situation. And when she fell and broke her shoulder, and she didn't just have a simple break, she managed to break up the joint and smash the arm into the shoulder. When that happened, she looked up at me because I was first on the scene. Her office adjoined mine. It was the central office and then the coffee rooms, work-study room, and then Francis's office. So we were within, 50 feet of each other for many years. And I was the first on the scene when the cry went up, Dr. Roberts has fallen. I got there, and she looked up at me with this peculiar grin, and she said, well, now we get advanced. She said, this is what it takes in order to get action. And we did indeed. Within weeks, they had put up a rail.
That fall was pretty close to what you made, wasn't it?
I don't remember the exact date. It's a long time ago, but she was still not recovered fully, but she had balance. She never really recovered her full balance and use of her feet. She wore braces till the day she died. And corrective shoes.
She passed away at 83. Today, that's relatively young. She could
At my age, it's childish. It's juvenile age. As I get closer to that mark, I find that it doesn't seem so old. Go ahead. I think that what you were probably going to say, and correct me, is that did I think all of these things contributed to her premature death? I think that they probably did. She struggled long and hard, and I think she was for many, many years a heavy smoker, chain smoker. She had cancer. She had the debilitating Guillain-Barré. She had this awful situation with her shoulder. And I think that it inevitably took its toll on her vision.
Yes, she always wanted to teach.
Oh yeah, she always wanted to continue teaching. I mean, even when she was in dire shape, she would try to teach at the senior center and gave lectures there, and she always was interested in learning. That never changed.
I would like to have a better understanding of the process and decision to honor her with Roberts Hall, the main building. Where did that idea originate? What was that process like? How did she feel about having that building named after her?
Well, she was very proud of it. She used to joke about it and say, you'll never have any telephone peace if they name a building after you, because, of course, public radio would always say in Roberts Hall. It started in the development office. It started with the administration, the idea that she was going to be retired and the contribution that she had made, and she certainly had support from a lot of the local organizations, and she had department support. And I think it just sort of became the idea that here was someone who had been a baseline sponsor and creator of the university, and that she should be honored in some way. And there may have been a secondary motive that perhaps at some point in time Francis would make a considerable donation to the university. I don't know. No one ever said that to me. But I can't think of anyone who contributed more to the university than she did. She certainly was very helpful in the money-raising effort of getting her portrait and establishing her scholarship. Probably part of this all stemmed from Martha Rambo. Are you familiar with Martha Rambo? Well, you should be, because Martha Rambo, at the time, Martha Sims, was married to the publisher of the Huntsville Times, and they were close, intimate friends. Martha Rambo's health is not very good. She was also on the board of trustees of the Alabama system. She also served as a representative on the Federal Reserve of Atlanta and was a very powerful individual. And Frances had been her teacher. And if I had to guess as to who was the prime mover of getting that building named for Frances, I would say it was probably Martha Rambo. And if she's not in good health, I understand, but if you can get an interview with Martha Rambo, she's known Frances since she was a student of hers. And the two of them were like peas in a pod. Very close. They worked together on innumerable projects, including the Twickenham District, the Wheaton House, Alabama Historical Commission. The only thing where Martha Rambo did not play a role was Constitution Hall building.
Jack Roberts had given an interview to Once the Times just before the dedication. That interview made it sound as though she did not really approve of the hall as an educational facility, that the rooms were kind of big blocks, they didn't have the windows, it should feel as conducive to education. Would you say that article then did not present a real accurate view of her feelings about the building?
Well, I think it was that she was proud to have a building named after her. I think she thought the building needed, I think she would have been happier if it had been a better constructed and better, more efficient use of space. And the university spent a lot of money trying to renovate and improve it. I mean, it was a disaster as far as design. They've done as much as they possibly can. It's still not as functional as one would like, but they have made enormous improvements. But I think she was really disappointed that it was a building that was designed by an architect who had not done a classroom building before. The major thing that was wrong with our floor was the fact that the initial estimate of what this building would cost missed by just under $1 million, and so they had to chop off 2 floors. Well, in the construction, they put what the 6th floor had been that was taken off, and the 5th floor that was taken off. They just transferred the 6th floor to the 4th floor instead of using the 1st floor as originally designed. This meant that we had the art department's workroom as the departmental office, and I remember walking in and finding that I had a work sink where my desk belonged. And that sort of thing. And the classrooms were not proper size or conducive to a comfortable arrangement. That's because they had taken the wrong floor plans. There were no outside windows except in the offices. And people used to complain and say, well, Frances Roberts and John White and Dr. Welker were on the building committee. Why didn't they do something? We fought tooth and nail just to get the windows that we got for the offices where the students would come to counseling. And we couldn't do anything about the architect's design whereby the rooms were in the center and had no outlet. We were supported in all of this by the art department and the other departments, but it made no difference.
It was a money issue.
It was a money issue, and it was unbelievably awkward situation. And gradually through the years, the university's improved the facility.
Dr. Roberts retired in 1980. A few years later, she was given an honorary PhD in human letters. That was driven by you, probably.
Well, whatever honor she got after her retirement, she certainly deserved. And, it's like saying, if you write a nomination for the Hall of Fame and she gets in, are you the one who's going to get the credit? There are a lot of people who work on that.
I guess my question is, I do not quite understand what honorary PhD is.
But it's an honorary degree. It's just a signal to the rest of the world that it's not just the academic degree, it's the summation of a humane letters is a summation of a person's career over and above the academic specialty of history. It's someone who's made a contribution and is being recognized. Now, in her case, it was earned and deserved, and certainly, again, I would say that Martha Rambo played a major role in that. All of these things have to be approved by the Board of Trustees. Francis was a well-known personality among the administration and the Board of Trustees, and there was never, outside of this tenure issue that she worked so hard on and was excoriated for, there was never any blemish against her as far as teaching, as far as her hard work, or anything like that. The board would have been hard-pressed to deny this honor to her because they had spread out before them decades of devoted service. I don't think that Francis expected such an honor.
In one newspaper interview, she said that once her mother passed away, that honors didn't have the same value to her. Receiving an award was important to her because it gave her mother so much joy.
I think that's typical of
Once her mother
Francis.
passed away, then awards and honors do not quite have the same value to her that they had once done.
Well, you must remember when we came for our interviews in 1966-67, Francis was maintaining care for her relatives in South Alabama and Aunt Ellen. And so anytime she left the house, she had to have a babysitter for Aunt Ellen or a caretaker or whatever the appropriate care term is, but around the clock service 24/7 in South Alabama. One of the things that was really very sad was that when I took over the chairmanship, Dr. Roberts, Dr. Welker, and Dr. Lavender, who was head of the language department, were the three least paid full professors in the entire Alabama system. I have never been known for diplomacy or discretion, and I raised the roof and threatened press, radio coverage, whatever. And Francis's salary tripled practically during my administration and still was out of line with the kind of contribution she was making. But the amount of money, if she had not inherited her house, she would have been in real poverty because her salary was given over to taking care of the family. She made more money in retirement than she did when she was teaching. Now, Frances was not moved one way or the other by money until she began to have a feel for what she could do when her salary was larger than it had been. Money was not her motive in anything that she did.
But even after she retired from the school, she was an active force. That's what drove her.
Oh, yes.
Very degree.
Oh, yes, she was a force in the community. She was not interested in much in the way of social engagements or things. That didn't matter to her. Whether she was invited to this cocktail party or that cocktail party, that was not her milieu. She was not interested in small talk. Frances gave me a lesson the first time I came to her when she was chairman. problem with a student who was raising a great deal of trouble. And I was asking for counsel on how to advise him because he was so disruptive to class. And he was an older student, and this is the late 60s. Frances said, "I'll handle it for you." And she said, in these situations, you sometimes have to get to the bedrock truth of what's disturbing the student. And she said to me, "I have found in my life that sooner or later you get to the truth, and I believe it should be sooner." And that probably is why I'm so outspoken, because I figured, why wrap it up in a pretty package, go ahead and say what the truth was. She did solve that problem with the student, and after his conference with Frances, when Frances called me in after it was over, she said, "I don't believe you'll have any more trouble with this student." And what she found out is that the student was tragically unhappy, and that it didn't have anything to do with me or the class. It had to do with his domestic arrangements. And she had the age, you see, and the white hair and the broad shoulders, and I was, a young whippersnapper. I was 27 years of age. And she was very patient with me. She said, that these things I would learn with age. But she was, she got cross with me. She certainly would tell me, and when I traded positions with her and became chairman, it was not unlike Frances to knock on my door and barge in and say, "I want to have a word with you." And when I would say, "Well, just a moment, I have someone here," she said, "Well, hurry it up, I need to speak with you." So,
Once she retired, I have very little information about what she did after she retired, other than a few talks at Girl Scouts or the Rotary Club. Did she continue teaching like with the senior citizen?
Oh yeah, she did a lot of that. Also, she spent a lot of time with her friend Dorothy Adair and Sue Reed. She also, would attend a lot of meetings on campus about various different projects that were coming along. She met at the highest levels about offering advice as to which plan should be adopted or anything. I think she appreciated being asked some of these questions. I don't know how much, because I was not privy to some of her meetings. I would say that she focused more on the Twickenham Historical District and the work she did with Harvey Jones on that district than anything else. I would say that became her life, if not her obsession. And she worked on the history of the Episcopal Church, the Church of the Nativity. And she continued to research, but she had a waning amount of energy.
And the loss of energy is the primary reason that maybe she didn't publish as much in the later years.
Oh, I think so. Now, the last time I saw Frances, it was before she had a loss of her mental faculties or a deterioration of her mental faculties in the last several years. She had slowed down, and it was just after Harvey Jones had died, and I think she felt like she had lost this one and the same, her best friend, her son, her mentor, her guidance counselor on the Twickenham district. And I don't think her life, that she ever really recovered from the death of Harvey.
Mrs. Jones asked me if in my research, my time in the archives, if I'd ever found any evidence that Dr. Roberts had begun work on the book that she was working on with Harvey Jones and he passed away.
I never heard of her working on a book with Harvey Jones. I know that she never finished either her history of Huntsville or some of the work she was doing on land distribution and land reform in Alabama. There was always tomorrow, and there was always another project, and it always came before these writing projects. And you've got to remember that writing, she didn't type, and writing was all by hand. And she didn't have the energy, and she didn't have the strength to organize all of her research and get it down on paper. But I was not aware of the book with Harvey Jones.
We have done photographs and architectural histories. She was going to put the inside on it and put the family histories to the buildings. And all the buildings were historic homes and buildings within the whole Huntsville portion of town.
Well, she was going to write a history of Huntsville, but long before she retired, she worried a great deal about the fact that many of the people that she would have to write about were still alive. And she also worried about how you present the truth without either offending or being sued or sounding like you're an old curmudgeon, or how much of scandal do you point out to the public, and how much of various families' behavior do you expose for what they were, which were all economic rather than either ethical or cultural or anything else. She did not mind taking them on in public in town meetings or things of that nature, but she was very conscious that once you put it down on paper that it would remain forever. And when you take someone down, their character, you attack their character or what actions they've taken, not only does it remain forever and create enmity in a community, it also passes to the children and the grandchildren. Francis and I had a saying together: it takes 15 seconds to tell a lie, and it takes a lifetime to refute it. So she was very conscious of what the written word could do.
Power of being destroyed and ethics and standards we should hold ourselves to as historians.
Absolutely. And she did not approve of fly-by-night histories and what she would call popular history. And that's the subject of the one controversy we had, was the fact that she thought I was putting promotional issues ahead. I was putting survival issues ahead. We hired one historian in Constitution Hall Village, and it was an absolute disaster. We had to let him go. Because there is so much to maintaining a museum. And she thought I'd sold out to the promoters, and she never would forgive me for that. I mean, in as much as you never forgive a close friend. I mean, you stay close friends, but you will always have that agree to disagree. She never missed an opportunity of telling me I made a mistake on that, and I never missed an opportunity of telling her that if she had prevailed, it would be closed and shut down. It became sort of a banter between us.
That it still exists. It's a great educational facility.
And is much expanded, because the person that was appointed was a very successful promoter. And I think that Francis would have liked me to have been proved wrong, but it didn't work out that way. She found that it stuck in her craw. But among people that have been you've got to realize that Francis was either at our house or we were at her house, or we went out to dinner 3 or 4 times a week. For many years, if she'd pick up the phone on a Saturday morning when Carolyn and I would be sleeping late, and she'd say, I feel like breakfast. How about if I come in 30 minutes? And we'd scramble to get ready to get out of bed and go have breakfast with Francis. And you can't replace that kind of friendship. And I'm of an age now, you're catching me at a late period of nostalgia, where I'm losing a lot of the friends, you see, that I had at that period. Dr. Welker just died. He was a close friend of Francis Schreiber. And she was very fond of De Los Amigos. We were all kind of a happy little group of warriors, because we all shared these values. And Frances never compromised on academic standards. She never let slide.
A trait of hers seemed to be that she could see the need for something. She would work to see it established, but she never cared much about running. She always seemed to find good people that she would run for help.
She had, yes, you're absolutely right. She had, if it's possible, even less patience than I have for people whining and saying why you can't do this, and splitting hairs and that sort of thing. And I think that's why she would withdraw once it was in safe hands.
She made sure those safe hands.
Yes, she made sure those safe hands. Yeah. But she really, I can tell you in faculty meetings and things like that, if she thought someone was wasting time, she would tell them so. Say, why don't you have something constructive? So, I learned a lot from her, and probably both good and bad, as far as being easy to work with. I think I took on her mantle. Let's get to the truth of the matter right now. I put my watch back on. That doesn't mean I'm out of time or anything. Go ahead with your questions.
I know that Dr. Roberts seemed to have drawn a lot of people to this university. Your wife, Dr. Joanna Shields, Dr. Ellen Hutchins, and Paul came to the university, Dr. Roberts. There are various people in the administration offices around the campus that they're nearly retired, the one that are part-time now, but they all came here because of Dr. Roberts. It's always goes back to this idea she was looking for people that shared her passion for students and for teaching and for education. Do you think in looking at the school today that her vision for UAH is somewhat different?
No. I wish I could say so. I think the university has come a long way in many respects, but I don't think it's a balanced institution. I don't think the liberal arts and the business school and the nursing program and the library science and all of that, I think that she would be disappointed at how much the technological aspects of the university. She did not want a technological institute. She wanted a well-rounded university. And what she really wanted was something modeled on Vanderbilt or University of Alabama or something of that nature. She didn't give a whit about athletics, but she did care about the curriculum and about the learning process, and she did not want to produce just scientists, although she would never say anything against engineering or the physical sciences.
It's just a portion of it.
But she saw a university as having a great art program, a great music program, and a great history program, and English and social sciences. Remember, it was Francis who brought to the university political science and helped me bring philosophy to the university. It was when I came here, there was essentially only two really functional departments, with languages coming along a bad third, but it was English and history. Or I should put it in a sense, English and history, because English was, at that time, the stronger of the two departments. No, I think she would be very disappointed that all of the emphasis had been shifted. And she had the same problem as the university has now, all of the top echelons of administration were engineers when she came here, and she constantly spent her time educating them to what she thought a university ought to be. And she had very close friends in the administration. She adored the ground that the first academic officer, Dr. Charlie Scott, walked on. She adored Joe Dowell. Both of them were first administrative vice president. She was very close to all of them. And when Frances got close to someone, that meant that she was close to their friends and their family. She was always involved with the families of her friends and friends of her friends. We, in the early years, had lots of visitors from overseas and other areas of the United States, and whenever Frances was aware that we had guests from out of town, she considered it her Southern hospitality, her personal duty to entertain them. And because she didn't cook, she always took us and our guests out of that. And we weren't alone in that. That was everyone that she treated that way.
And that built this network of friends, so that when she needed support with a project or an idea, that was where she drew from. That supports everything that I understand. Boy, I think I pretty much covered my questions.
Okay.
Very appreciative of your time. Thank you.
That's not a big deal. I'm only too glad to give my time. I'd say there are hundreds of people in this city who miss Frances. Even those that fought tooth and nail with her on historical committees or organizations, even those that cross swords with her on university policies. We all, those of us who were close friends, miss that sort of pillar of strength that could unite so many. And if people disagreed with her and people fought with her, well, that's just too bad. I think she was generally on the side of angels. I'd say 98% of the time. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. What occurred to you?
You want me to stop it now?